Hello and welcome to our latest Facebook Live. I'm here with Kevin Maguire. I think you're associate editor, is that right, Kevin? I've got the job title right.
Anything happened the last half an hour, yeah.
And we're here responding to the spending review today, which for all the billing of it being not about your pocket and just very boring and about Whitehall departmental budgets, it's actually going to make quite a difference to a lot of our readers. So I've got some of the headline stuff here. Minimum wage is going up, but only by 19p an hour. Now that's compared to 49p that we thought it was going to go up before coronavirus hit. Benefits are going up next year, but again, only by 37p a week, which is pretty much nothing. That's 0.5%. And people on universal credit still don't know if they're going to go up by if they're going to keep this £20 rise that they got in the spring. That's 6 million people who have a lot of uncertainty till the new year. The big thing is the public sector pay freeze. So teachers, police, armed forces, firefighters, they're all going to have their pay frozen unless they earn less than £24,000. The only people exempt are people who work in the NHS. It's a real divide and rule policy, is what the unions are saying. And then to whip through some of the others, foreign aid is being cut by about £4 billion. Tory minister has already resigned in protest over that. You'll face a 5% council tax rise next year. However, there is money going into other things. So testing, PPE, vaccines, NHS, transport, councils, albeit council tax is a lot of that. Rough sleeping, devolved government, schools, all of those are getting money, but it comes at a cost. So the overall picture here is that the Chancellor is saying we don't have to pay for coronavirus yet. You know, the financial situation is the worst in 300 years, but we are going to have to pay in future. And some of the things that you've seen that hit you in the pocket are the beginning of that, and there could be a lot more to come. So I'm going to say before I hand over to Kevin, make sure you get us some questions, anything about how it hits you in the comments, and we'll try to answer them. But Kevin, how does it strike you? What's the biggest story from this?
It's grim, and it's going to get grimmer. Now we all know that coronavirus has been a huge economic as well as health shock. That livelihoods have been damaged and destroyed, as well as lives lost. We're doing badly on both compared to many other countries, which I would suggest says the wrong political choices were made by Boris Johnson and the government at the beginning, and I think they're making those political choices badly now. It's clear, as you say, divide and rule on public service workers, people who were clapped as heroes not very long ago, kept the country going. Well, they're going to get it. A wage freeze means a 1.5% cut in living standards because of the inflation projection. It'll save probably a couple of billion, but in a 2 trillion plus economy, national debt 2 trillion plus, it's loose change. He's made a decision there to hurt these people. He clearly thinks there's going to be some political capital out of it, and equally with the cuts in international development helping the world's poorest. They're very controversial within the Conservative Party. As you said, a Foreign Office minister's already resigned. There are Conservative MPs who are furious. All those Conservative MPs, including Boris Johnson, stood on an election manifesto in December 19, saying they were proud to maintain that spending. Now he's changed. Now, the argument will be that coronavirus has turned everything upside down. I get that argument, but if that is the argument, then everything has changed. And I do believe whatever Brenda of Bristol thinks is that we should have a general election next autumn. So the country can decide when we come out of the health crisis, hopefully the vaccine will have restored life to something like how it was. When we come out of it, we can decide what direction we will go in future. Otherwise, this is just going to be a return to Tory austerity. And I think a lot of people do not want that. They remember what happened last time. They want to build back better, to use that Conservative Party slogan. But we're not going to be doing that if we try to cut and slash our way forward. You have to grow. You take money out of people's pockets, and they won't be there to spend. They won't be paying tax. You're just going to shrink the economy even further. So I think Rishi Sunak, who came up with the furlough scheme, which was his crowning glory, was a great idea. I just don't think he is a chancellor for the recovery.
interesting what you say about an election, Kevin. That is truly a statement with no compassion for us poor reporters who haven't had any sleep since 2015. So we've got some questions coming in now. Jan Beefman asks, are pensioners getting any rise? The answer to that is yes, they are. They're getting 2.5% in April, which all told is not that bad, considering the triple lock. Now, benefit claimants, other benefit claimants, are not getting that. So we still don't know if Universal Credit is going to keep this £20 rise that it got or actually fall back down again. And other benefits like disability benefits are up by only 0.5%. So, I mean, dare I ask, Kevin, but is that fairness or is the triple lock a problem? You know,
yeah, I think
really fair to everyone.
Yeah, I don't see why we have to play one off against the other. That is the clear old divide and rule politics, trying to pit one group in society against another. What happened to we're all in this together? Truth, we never were, but it might be a good idea to aim and try and get us all in together. Now, that £20 universal credit figure you say, I think it's about 6 million people. Is it 6 million families? It's a rather large number.
That's right.
They could be getting a very hefty cut in living standards next April. Now they are amongst the poorest by definition of qualifying for that in society. Now pensioners, look, most of them paid in through a working life. They paid a lot of money. They've got this triple lock. I know it's controversial in some areas. The truth for the government is, if it took it away now, it would save relatively little, breaking yet another manifesto promise in December 19. It would save very little in the short term. Yes, the long term, but not in the short term. What may happen, though, to pensioners in the longer term is they're looking at whether increases should in future be on the consumer price index rather than the retail price index. The retail price index is generally higher, so there may be a backdoor cut for pensioners down the line.
So John asks, how strong will the effect be on the public service? I mean, it's a pretty big deal. So the public service workers who are getting their pay cut are those who earn more than $24,000 a year, and we're told that's it's about 2/3-ish of public sector workers. Now, the government insists that not all of them are getting this pay freeze, a cut in real terms, as I said it, just because some people get sort of progression pay. As you stay somewhere for longer, you get, you know, a little bump in your pay. But that's not a proper pay rise. So it's huge, John. It's sort of 2 billion people, and it's what Kevin was talking about.
Yeah. Well, again, look, there's two arguments, I think, on public service pay. Some might have 3 or 4, but 2 is it morally right to do it when you have stood as a prime minister, cabinet ministers, Tory MPs, you have stood and applauded public service workers. Those Thursday clappings at 8 p.m. started for the NHS, then went a bit wider to carers, and then became all public service workers. Is it right now, after that, to cut them? Is that morally right? I would argue it is not. And remember, carers employed by councils will be among those who get cut, but police officers, people in councils, refuse collectors, keeping housing going, people in the DWP, worked in job centres, firefighters, they all went to work. They all did their jobs. They kept the country going. Is it morally right to cut them out? I would say no. But secondly, what is going to be the impact on morale? Now, presumably the government is banking on unemployment soaring to 2.6 million, a million up, and that will dissuade some from trying to leave and get other jobs. That's what they must be doing. But it's not really going to boost morale. And if you want to bring the country round, get the economy growing, you want people to have money in their pockets, you want them to be paying tax, and you want them to be spending. I think it was Labour's Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds who said Sunak had taken a sledgehammer to consumer confidence. It was one of her better performances. I've been rather critical of that in the past, but I thought her analysis and her delivery were better than the person she was shadowing today. And it was just a very, very good point. It's loose change in an economy in the state it is, but it can be very damaging, taking away what is that relative loose change.
So Pam Ann asks, what about social care? and she says her daughter works in social care. You know, we've got thousands of readers in this situation. So mixed picture is the answer, because the government has said overall there'll be sort of big numbers of money for social care and more money for PPE and stuff. However, first of all, a lot of that money comes to councils, and councils have to raise that money through council tax, which is going up next year. And the second thing is that social care workers, are on minimum wage a lot of the time. So the minimum wage is only going up by 19p if you're only over 25, 19p an hour in April. That's a lot less than we thought, and that will hit those social care workers. And that's the real problem for them.
It is, and many are on that minimum wage, or around at £8.72 at the moment. It was going to go up to £9.21. That would have been a 49p increase. That's still a lot less than the real living wage. That's calculated at £9.50 or £10.85 if you live in London. So social care workers, again, they were applauded. Then they do incredible jobs. They're invaluable jobs, but they are massively underpaid. Also, local authorities say social care is hugely underfunded. I think they're getting an extra £1 billion, but they say that is nowhere near what is required. So I'm afraid, once again, those people who were clapped, they were applauded, they were going to get a badge, I seem to recall, from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. Don't know if they did. But they're not going to get a pay rise. I would have thought they were justified. They wwere entitled to. And the Low Pay Commission, this is the political cover, I think, for the government. They had recommended the bigger increase, and then they feared it would lose jobs. So they back the smaller increase is how I believe it's worked. But if you funded those increases, and you can fund them centrally. Look, there's always been money for Conservative donors. We see getting big fat contracts and commissions. You sort out social care, but you have the political commitment and make the political choice to do it.
So civil servants, Julie asks about what happens if you're on, I think she means less than 20k per annum. Now they will get some kind of pay rise. I think the Chancellor said it would be £250.
Yeah, at least.
At least, yeah. So, I mean, it's a good thing to cushion the poorest workers from having their pay frozen or cut in real terms. The problem is that perhaps that's being done to take some of the heat out of this announcement and to distract from the sort of the unfairness of all the other civil servants having their pay frozen, even though it was frozen for 7 years under the Tories.
Yeah, Dan, the fact that something like 2 million public service workers earn less than 24,000 a year, which if you do that weekly, it must be about, I don't know, £480 a week before tax and national insurance. It does also dent, if not kill, this idea that all public service workers are rolling in cash and getting massively overpaid. It just ain't the case. And I know people are suffering in the private sector too, and the government keeps playing on this, saying, look, it's a classic divide and rule. But anybody in the private sector ain't going to get a pay rise because somebody suffers in the public sector. So let's not fall for that old political trick.
Yes. So Clawfish, not his real name, I'm sure, says, will anything transpire for freelancers and creatives who are not eligible for funding? Short answer is no, not at the moment. But today's announcement hasn't got any of that new sort of specific COVID stuff that goes into your pocket. And a lot of the people who are called the excluded, this is millions of self-employed, weren't eligible for cash. And the sort of the criteria hasn't changed over all this time. So if you weren't eligible at the start for these self-employment grants, you're not eligible now. I guess that plays to what Kevin was talking about holes in the system. Yeah,
it's a gaping hole here, and I do think the furlough scheme was very good, backed by the CBI and the TUC. Sunak was forced into it. He's made mistakes on it. For instance, he was watering it down too quickly, and then he left it too close to Halloween to say it will be extended to the end of next March, when hopefully the vaccines kicked in and we're out of the health crisis. But I can't believe that he hasn't yet just filled in those holes, excluded the 3 million freelancers who are just having a terrible, torrid time. It just seems really, really unfair. And they say, well, there might be problems with tax records and so on. Well, they're being given been given money to companies that you can trace back to tax havens or owned by incredibly wealthy people. Look, you can check it all out. It takes time. I know it takes time, but you can make payments up front, and then you can check them retrospectively. You'll have people's national insurance numbers. You'll know where they live. You can do this, but it just seems grotesquely unfair that this 3 million excluded are still excluded when he's passed up yet another opportunity to help them.
So this is the last question, I'm afraid, because we all have to get back to pouring through these fascinating budget documents. But Jackie asks, what about cuts for the rich and how are they helping to pay? Now, that's the really interesting thing here, because what the Treasury will tell you is, well, this isn't the budget, so it doesn't have tax rises and that sort of thing. So this isn't the time to sort of soak the rich. However, even though it doesn't have tax rises, there are quite a lot of ways in which the sort of less well off are paying for this through all the things that we've talked about. So let's, from a mirror point of view, let's hope there's some balance coming down the line, presumably, in the budget next year, but we don't know that yet. Yeah,
well, it's you just got to say again, it's really unfair that those with least have been hit most, and those with most have been hit least. If we're going to raise taxes, there was a Treasury report, I think, within the Treasury, and a tax simplification unit. You could change capital gains tax and raise £14 billion because capital gains tax is at a lower rate than income tax. Never understood it. I just merged the two if I was the Chancellor. Or you could change pension tax relief, given that so much of it goes to those who are on the highest earnings. We didn't hear anything about that. Now, he'd be mulling it over, but I suspect he's worried about his MPs, his right-wing MPs in particular, who kind of often confuse people who are middle class with those earning well into six figures. Well, that's a tiny percentage of the population. So he'll be looking at it. He's a banker himself, married to an heiress. He's absolutely loaded. I'm sure his own position won't influence any decision he makes about high income earners and the wealthiest. I'm sure that's just won't happen at all.
Perish the thought, Kevin. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. And sorry, it's a bit of a short one this time, but we've all got to get on, and I'm sure we'll be back doing another Facebook Live shortly. Check back to the Facebook page for more details, facebook.com/Daily Mirror, I think it is. And have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.